Hey, it's Gerald from Lakers Fast Break. Anchor is the easiest way to make your next podcast. It's absolutely free, and their creation tools will allow you to record and edit your show right from your phone or your home computer. Anchor will then distribute your podcast for you so it can be heard on great podcast outlets like Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Radio Public, Google Podcasts, and many more. You can even make money from your podcast with no minimum listenership. It's everything you need to make a podcast all in one place. So download the free Anchor app today or go to anchor.fm to get started on your next podcast. All right, and we're back for another episode of the Lakers Fast Break podcast. It's Gerald Glassford coming right back at you here from Pop Culture Cosmos, the Lakers Fast Break, Inside Sports Fantasy Football, and Game Source. We truly appreciate everyone out there listening to all of our great shows, and if you can, please give us that 5-star review on Apple Podcasts, or if you can like, share, subscribe, Spotify, you can go ahead and follow us there. Anywhere else, you can go ahead and listen to your podcast apps. We truly appreciate if you go ahead and connect right to the Lakers Fast Break podcast. Plus, if you can also give my good friend Rafael Barlow from NBA Draft Junkies all of his great stuff, his great page, his great YouTube page, his 2 shows, Run the Floor and NBA Draft Junkies. If you can go ahead and give him the same kind of love, it is truly appreciated. He's taken the day off because he's actually working for a lot of projects right now for NBA Draft Junkies. So he'll have all those things that he's working on here up over the weekend on NBA Draft Junkies on YouTube. So if you can, check that out. So I will be glad to talk to him tomorrow when we do a post-game wrap-up of the Lakers and Blazers Game 5, which is, as my guest was so correct on, is going to take place on Saturday. So a weekend, it is starting back up for the NBA playoffs because the NBA and ESPN were still listing games on Friday, but they are not continuing today. So we want to talk about what's coming up this weekend for the Los Angeles Lakers and the Portland Trail Blazers in Game 5. And here with me today is the man behind Lakerholics.com. Please be part of the Lakerholics.com experience today. You can be in on that conversation right now, because there's a lot of stuff going on, a lot of comments, things of that nature. So be part of the conversation today at Lakerholics.com. It is the man behind it. I know him as Tom Wong, but you know him as LakerTom. And LakerTom, great to have you on the show. The playoffs are back. I know we talked a little bit about that we were how excited, or the level of enthusiasm, I should say, about it, because it comes as just such a tumultuous week for everyone out there on social media, and also as well just out there in real life with all the events going on there, and the unfortunate shooting and this terrible incident that happened with Jacob Blake, and the support that the Black Lives Matter movement got this week from the NBA players and the sports world combined. So I want to hear your thoughts as we head into the weekend, and go ahead and just, like I said before, go and get this weekend started with some NBA playoffs.
Well, you know, they always say that one of the great escapes that we have in our society is sports. And I was sitting there thinking the other day when it looked like there might not be any NBA playoffs, how much I was going to miss that, you know, and how much I was going to miss the opportunity to see the Lakers have a shot at their 17th championship. So I'm really grateful that things worked out, and that we are going to see basketball again.
There are revised measures. I do want to say there are revised measures as far as what the league and the players union came to an agreement on for the Black Lives Matter movement, and also the messages that they want to convey to the worldwide audience out there.
I just did a piece for Lakerholics.com that really sort of jumped on that same subject. Basically, I felt that LeBron James choreographed this entire situation by walking out and threatening to threatening to not play in the playoffs. I mean, if the Lakers and LeBron were to pull out of the bubble, it's hard to imagine the NBA moving forward with the games.
Yeah.
And I think LeBron actually used that as a way to force the NBA to step up to the plate. It's not a coincidence that the three things that the NBA added to its support of Black Lives Matter were all perfectly aligned with More Than a Vote, which is the charitable organization that LeBron and several other Black athletes and entertainers created to promote and support minority voting. So one of them was to form a group involving the players, the governors of the league, and so forth, to promote social justice and especially focused on getting minorities to vote and protecting their right to vote. The second was to formalize this whole effort that's been going on piecemeal to use the NBA arenas, where they have control of those arenas, to make them giant, safe voting venues for the coming election. And the third thing was to use the power of the sponsors of the league to create a series of advertisements that would run during all of the playoff games, supporting and educating voters, minority voters especially, on what their rights are and where they can go to vote and what the situation is with the various different rules that are in all of the different jurisdictions as to whether you can vote in advance and whether you can drop off your ballot into a box, whether you can mail it and so forth. So I never believed for a moment that LeBron really meant anything close to saying that he was going to walk away, take his ball and not play. And I think that he did a masterful job of making sure that he got the NBA to step up to the plate a little more and make even a bigger commitment to it. Unfortunately, there's a little bit of a conflict going on now. Stephen A. Smith came out with a video that basically was saying that the young guns in the league and some of the owners were very angry because after they had supposedly agreed on everything in a meeting yesterday morning, LeBron grabbed the microphone and talked for 15 minutes, basically. And apparently he was a lot of the people thought that he was being kind of presumptuous and talking down to some of the younger players. And so all of a sudden we don't see that same unanimity that we saw where everybody was on the same page. There was also quite a bit of criticism that was going on about the Milwaukee Bucks players for sort of springing that boycott on the rest of the league, not giving the other 4 teams that were playing or the other 5 teams that were playing that night any notice of what was going to happen, and just to give a general feeling that it was disorganized and they didn't really know what the outcome was going to be. It turned a chaotic situation, and it's my opinion, I haven't heard it from anybody else, but it's my opinion that LeBron took advantage of that situation and basically used it to get some more power for his More Than a Vote campaign. And I applaud him for doing that. And I think that, as I've said several times on our podcast, there's nothing more important for the African American and minority communities in this country to vote and to register and to get out there and become educated on the issues. You can't complain. In a lot of ways, people say you can't complain if you don't vote. I think everybody in this country has a right to complain because you're a citizen. But if you really want the power to do something about it, you have to register to vote. Chris Paul's done that with everybody on the Oklahoma Thunder team. I think that every one of the representatives on the NBA teams needs to do that with all of the players on their teams. And I'm really looking forward to seeing what LeBron and More Than a Vote people can do to get the minorities in this country to really use the power that's in their hands and the power that they have when they go into those voting booths to make the changes that they really believe in. Get out and vote.
Yes,
everybody.
Get out and vote. Let's just try to get this thing back to basketball. But anyways,
the reason we're in this whole situation where the NBA had to cancel the season or suspend the season, if you will, and the reason that we had to go into this bubble and all of these things are because our president didn't do the job that he should have done in making sure that this virus did not go crazy.
Oh, that's for sure. But, I like I said, I don't want to go there because then you and I are going to go down the road and just talk about this, and then we're just going to get all sad and musty.
What do you think's going to happen in the game tomorrow? Let's talk about the game.
Let's talk about the game. Let's talk about the game indeed. Once again, I'm talking to LakerTom. He is part of LakerHolics.com. You got to be part of the conversation today at LakerHolics.com. So let's run this through real quickly so we can wrap this thing up, my friend. Tomorrow, 3 games on the docket, including Milwaukee and Orlando. It looks like Milwaukee, all things considered, if they have their heads on, even somewhat straight, which I'm going to talk about in a sec with the Lakers, they should finish off Orlando real quick.
Yeah, Bucks in 5 is pretty much foregone conclusion, I think, too.
Yeah, absolutely. Then we have Houston and Oklahoma City. And it looks like from all instances, because he's already practicing with explosion, from what I heard. Yep. I love how that word always just comes into play. He is an explosive player. Russell Westbrook, they get him back in the lineup. Do you think he's the missing ingredient Houston really needs to get this done?
Unless Raphael is correct and Luka Doncic has another level still that he can go this year, I think it's inevitable.
But yeah, right now it looks like that Westbrook will be the missing ingredient that they need, and it looks like I'm picking Houston to win the next 2.
Yeah, it looks like the Rockets and Clippers are going to be the Lakers' next 2 opponents. I don't see how that's going to be avoided at this point in time.
This is Raphael from NBADraftJunkies.com, and you are listening to the Lakers Fast Break.
Hey, Lakers fans! Looking for the best place to go for up-to-date news, information, original videos, articles, podcasts, opinion pieces, and discussions about the Los Angeles Lakers? Well, look no further than LakerHolics.com. With a legion of followers always there talking about everything Lakers and the NBA, there's no better place to go to share your fandom as the team heads toward another championship run. So stop by and be part of the conversation today at LakerHolics.com. And last but not least, we have the Lakers and Portland Trail Blazers. The only thing I question, I was talking about this before we went on the air, and that is this. I'm concerned that the Lakers, after the events of the past few days, might this game not have it all together because of the emotions, and you ride such a, an animated, strong high, and emotions got real tense and things of that nature, that they will have a letdown come Saturday because they won't see Damian Lillard, who is back in Portland or back home per se, getting treatment on his finger and his knee. So I want to ask you this, my friend. There is that possibility of letting one slip by, but the rest of the series I don't think is in doubt.
I don't know what it is about this particular season, but what makes it so arduous for the Lakers is every time they just get rolling and are just dominating and looking like surefire champions, something bad happens. The first time we sweep the Bucks and the Clippers, and bam, we get a hiatus for coronavirus. Then we come out here and we play probably the best half that we've played in the whole year and totally demolish the Rockets, lead by 38 points. And the Bucks decide to start a boycott.
But they were very right in doing so. I want to make that clear. They were very right in doing so.
Yeah, and in Milwaukee, in Wisconsin, we have the horrible things that happened to Jacob Blake. But it just seems like we have these things happen every time the Lakers get to a peak. So I can understand your anxiety about what's going to happen in the game tomorrow. You have the additional factor that you got 2 players who are on the roster, the bubble roster of the Lakers, who did not want to play, did not want to go on. Rajon Rondo and Dwight Howard. How's that going to affect, the...
Well, Rondo, he hasn't even come back in the lineup yet. So he might show up tomorrow because if he's had that kind of time to maybe rest up, maybe get him in the lineup, which I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing, because what kind of Rondo are you going to get at this point? I wouldn't expect too much, at least not.
Think he's going to play. I don't think he would play in that situation.
Well, he might be, because
unless unless it's an easy win and there's garbage time, then it makes sense to get him some play time. But it's what it does to the chemistry of the team that concerns me. I mean, Dwight had his doubts at the beginning of the season, like you talked about yesterday, where both Dwight and Avery sort of were supporting Kyrie's, whole feeling about maybe we should be on the front lines of the protest rather than playing games in the bubble. I made a comment at LakerHolics.com, and I almost erased it after I made it. But comment was that I wondered whether or not Dwight Howard and Rajon Rondo were going to be on the team next year. LeBron wants to win a championship. And as I said in my article, I never believed for a second that he was really serious about taking his ball and going home. He's always had a double goal. Do everything he can to win a championship and do everything he can to help his people get education, justice, and opportunity. It's a dicey thing I think LeBron is not a vengeful person and so forth, but I don't like the whole fact that the two of the players voted not to continue the playoffs. I mean, then how do you, that creates some schism with the chemistry, the sensational chemistry that the Lakers have. So we'll have to see how that plays out.
And that's something we'll talk about after the game tomorrow. Right. Whether or not the Lakers win or lose, we'll have a post game on that. We'll see how we measure it, because the once solidified team chemistry, it's not there. But again, we will go talk about how they can build that back up, things they can do to get that up, because they were actually starting to look like the old Lakers just before this shutdown happened and these cancellations of games. But again, we'll have to go ahead. Tomorrow, I think, will be a good gauge for if the Lakers can refocus and if they can go ahead and basically just get that mindset once again. But they will have some time off if they win tomorrow, because the Houston-Oklahoma City series has to go one more game beyond that. So they'll get an extra couple days at least. So that's a good thing. So we can go ahead and get a better idea if the Lakers, if they win tomorrow, again, without Damian Lillard, they should be okay. But again, how much can you limit CJ McCollum? That's one thing they're going to have to focus on. Like I told you before we went on the show, I think the Raphael strategy of letting Melo be Melo and letting him shoot all the twos he wants, that one might be an option. Just don't let Nurkic destroy you on the boards like he did in the previous game. And just simple, smart defensive schemes tomorrow. I think that's going to work. I don't expect a 40-point blowout. I don't expect him to get about a 20. I expect him, like I said, there's going to be some struggles. I think the shooting, especially because of that layoff, because they were in a rhythm and they're now been taken out of that rhythm. So there are things tomorrow that I expect will happen just because of the way it is when you have this kind of layoff, that kind of emotion spent, and those kind of harsh issues and hard feelings that they have right now going into this game. So I'm not expecting much. I'm hoping for a Lakers blowout. I'm hoping just to get it done and go on from there. But again, we're talking about human emotions. We're talking about real human issues here. And in the end, that might be the reason why the Lakers might struggle tomorrow. So
I don't think they're going to play great. I think they're going to win fairly easily, but it's probably going to be a sloppy game.
That might be the case where both teams play bad.
Be heavily motivated, but as you said, we've lost some of the sheen off of where we were. It has to take some effect. You just hope that it's something that we can overcome. One of the things that's probably really important in this bubble environment is those extra days of practice that we might be able to get, because you really need that to get the skill sets honed and get the chemistry back to where it was before. Make sure there aren't any hard feelings from the struggles that they had in the various meetings that they had and so forth. And it's you ever been on a vacation where things went wrong, things were really horrible, and all of a sudden you're talking to your wife about, should we just call this vacation off? The kids are giving you trouble or whatever it happens to be, and you're halfway through it, And this is something you were looking so forward to, and all of a sudden in the middle of it, you're wondering, man, maybe it's better to get it done with. That's kind of like some of these guys are going to feel like.
That was me yesterday, my friend. That was me yesterday. We'll be back with more of the Lakers Fast Break podcast. Check out what's been going on with the Pop Culture Cosmos Show and the PCC Multiverse.
I see the potential for basically like another Netflix kind of paradigm shift where here comes this other major player. They have a ton of resources. Apple could change the way that entertainment is consumed.
They say it's the only time this year that you'll have stars from each brand battling each other, and we know it's not going to be the case, but they like to say that, and more power to them, I guess.
Well, it's a big first step, bringing all those superheroes together. There were definitely some parts of the movie that I really enjoyed, and then there were some parts that I thought just kind of fell short of expectation.
Part of it has to be something to do with how it's being promoted, and this is a thing where audiences do not agree with critics.
That's the Pop Culture Cosmos Show.
And the PCC Multiverse, every week on Apple Podcasts.
And over a dozen of your favorite streaming and podcasting options. But I will tell you what, my friend, it is something that we're going to be looking at going forward. Plus tomorrow, again, we're going to have a wrap-up because there are NBA playoff games starting tomorrow, especially the Lakers-Blazers Game 5. We'll be wrapping up tomorrow night. Raphael will be joining us tomorrow night. He's actually doing a lot of secret projects that he's going to be releasing here very soon over the course of the weekend at NBA Draft Junkies on YouTube. So please check it out. Plus, LakerTom, I know you just said you dropped an article today for your Medium.com, but also as well for Lakerholics.com. So before we head on out, what are you and the guys working on for Lakerholics.com?
Well, as I discussed during the show, the article that I did was basically about how LeBron basically gave a message to the NBA and choreographed this entire thing in order to. He never really intended to not show up for the playoffs, and the playoffs are still as important to him as helping out the movement for his people. I've got a couple of other articles. I always have 2 or 3 articles that I'm working on, just basically so that I have something to do during my spare time. So I may have something else, but it's great to get the games back. You know, we're going to go into an off season sooner than I like. We still got another 6-7 weeks of basketball, and I expect the Lakers to be successful during that. And we've had some great conversations on Lakerholics.com. So I invite everybody to, stop by the website. You may not agree with everything I write or everything that you hear from Gerald in his Lakers Fast Break podcast or from Raphael in his videos. But there's a lot of great conversation and dialogue about those events and from intelligent, informed people who respect everybody's opinion. And so I welcome everybody to please stop by, sign up, make a comment, let us know what you think. And I think you'll enjoy the experience. It's great to talk Lakers. I look forward every day to opening up the blog the same way as I look forward to logging on and for a podcast with Gerald and Raphael. It's talking Lakers is one, and talking Lakers and pro basketball is one of the things that it's one of the escapes that I need in today's political environment and social environment.
Well, even though you and I are politically aligned in our beliefs, I will say this: our Laker beliefs, our NBA beliefs, they are definitely not always aligned. And sometimes that makes for the best shows.
For the best conversations. It's funny. I sent out an email today to my blog editors. I've got 2 blog editors whose job is basically to generate conversation in the blog by commenting on the podcast, videos, and articles that the original content we create. And I told them, I said, got to remember that when Gerald does a podcast or Raphael does a video or I do an article, yeah, it's great to thank us for doing that, but that's not what we're looking for. What we're looking for is what's your take on it? We want to know what you think about it. We want to know if you think that's crazy, if you agree with it. One of the things that I do during the long off seasons, obviously, is a lot of trade stuff. And I do that simply because it's one of those things that gets people's juices going.
Oh, yes.
Gets them talking about it, and when you talk about those things, you start to understand what are the things that the club needs. What are the types of players that they're looking for? How do those players fit into the lineups that we have and the roster we have? How do the finances work with it? What makes sense in the trade? Is this a trade that could really happen, or is it just nothing more than a pipe dream by a bunch of hometown fans? So there's a lot of wonderful ideas and things that you get when you have these conversations. And the only requirement is be respectful and be smart. Have something to contribute. And you're more than welcome to join the conversation.
Be part of that conversation today at LakerHolics.com. Yes, especially around his Trader Tom talks. It gets, from me especially, it gets very controversial.
Trader Tom, just for you, Gerald.
Sounds good. Sounds good
Trader
indeed.
Tom can chime in on all of my trades and say, what a great idea.
Yes. Well, you won't hear that from me. But anyways, it is LakerTom from LakerHolics.com. We do agree politically, but we sure as heck don't agree on LakerTom as a GM. But you can see all those crazy trades when he does them and all the other great articles that he does on the Lakers and so much more. In fact, I will throw up my mock draft 3.0 that I debuted on popculturecosmos.com earlier this week. I will throw that up on the Lakerholics blog this weekend at Lakerholics.com, so you can get an idea on who I think the Lakers might pick, or Lakers might go for, coming up later this year as well. Well, Tom, it's been great talking to you. I'm excited for NBA playoffs once again, but I also want to make sure that everybody stays aware of what's going on as far as the continual movement that needs to be taking place, and for the end of systemic racism, for justice to be served, and also for us to unite as a people together to go ahead forth and just try to end our differences one day. Hopefully, I'm hoping that we can go ahead and think about this in a smarter, more caring fashion, and hopefully we can go ahead and treat others with respect as we like to be treated, even if it is Tom telling me a crazy trade or two. But again, Tom, it's always great to have you here. Thanks so much for listening. We'll have Raphael back tomorrow, and who knows who we'll have? LakerTom and more right here this weekend at the Lakers Fast Break Podcast.